He wasn't barking at nothing. The sound cut through the training facility like a blade dragged slow across glass, low and steady, not loud but deep enough to settle into the bones of everyone in the room, and yet no one could see what the dog was seeing, not the handlers, not the volunteers, not the line of hopeful veterans waiting with quiet patience and paper forms clutched in their hands, and especially not the man standing still at the far end of the corridor, fingers resting lightly on the worn grip of a white cane. His eyes open but unfocused, fixed somewhere beyond the walls as if listening to a world no one else could hear. Daniel Hayes didn't flinch when the German shepherd growled, didn't step back like the others, didn't ask the question everyone else was already whispering under their breath, because when you've lived long enough in darkness, you learn that fear doesn't always come from what makes the most noise. Sometimes it comes from what doesn't make any at all, and right now, what Daniel heard wasn't danger, it was direction, a shift in the air, the faint scrape of claws against polished concrete, the measured exhale of a dog holding itself back from something it didn't fully trust. "That one's not safe," a voice muttered somewhere to his left, low, cautious, the kind of warning people give when they've already made up their minds. "Retired K9, flagged for aggression, unpredictable." And the word hung there for a moment, heavy and convenient, because unpredictable was easier to accept than misunderstood, easier than asking why a trained police dog would stare at empty space like it was filled with something real. Rex stood at the edge of his kennel, body still, muscles tight beneath a coat the color of smoke and ash, ears forward, eyes locked not on the crowd, not on the handlers, but on the one man who couldn't see him. And when the growl came again, it wasn't louder, it was closer. A quiet warning wrapped in restraint, the kind that didn't ask for attention but demanded to be noticed. Daniel tilted his head slightly, just enough to catch it, the subtle vibration in the air, the rhythm behind the sound, and for a second the room seemed to narrow, voices fading, footsteps dissolving into the background until there was only that presence, steady and deliberate, moving toward him. No one told Rex to step forward, no command was given, no leash tightened, and yet he moved anyway, one slow step, then another, closing the distance between himself and a man who couldn't read the warning signs everyone else saw so clearly on paper. "Sir, I wouldn't," someone started, but the sentence never finished, because Rex had already reached him. Already lowered his head, already placed it gently against Daniel's outstretched hand as if the decision had been made long before this moment, long before the files, the labels, the quiet fear that clung to his name. Daniel didn't pull away, didn't hesitate, his fingers brushing through thick fur, feeling the warmth, the tension, the life beneath it, and for the first time since he walked into that building, something in his expression shifted, not a smile, not relief, but recognition, like finding a signal in static you didn't know you were searching for. Behind them, someone exhaled sharply, another voice whispered, "This is a mistake." But neither of them moved, not the man without sight, not the dog everyone said was too dangerous to trust, and somewhere in the stillness between them, something unseen passed quietly, something no one else in that room could hear, or smell, or feel, but Rex did, and that was the problem, because whatever he was sensing, it hadn't gone away, and he wasn't about to ignore it. Daniel does not ask for permission when he closes his hand gently over the dog's neck, not gripping, not commanding, just resting there like a man testing whether something real can exist without sight, and for a moment the world around him waits, the faint hum of fluorescent lights overhead, the distant echo of a metal door shutting somewhere down the hall. The quiet shifting of boots on polished concrete as people hold their breath without realizing it. "Mr. Hayes?" a woman says carefully. Her voice measured, trained to stay calm even when the situation is not. "That dog has a record. He was pulled from active duty early. There were incidents we could not fully explain." And she pauses on that last word like it might soften the meaning, but Daniel only tilts his head slightly, listening not to her but to the slow, controlled breathing beneath his hand, the steady rhythm that does not match the tension in the room. "Incidents," he repeats quietly, as if testing the weight of it, and Rex shifts almost imperceptibly, not away, not defensive, just aware, always aware, like a soldier who never learned how to stand down. Daniel's fingers trace along the collar, feeling the worn edges, the faint indentation where a tag used to hang, a history reduced to texture and silence. And somewhere in that silence he finds something that does not align with the word dangerous, something disciplined, something restrained. What kind of incidents? He asks, and this time the answer takes longer, because truth has a way of hesitating when it does not fit the narrative people have already chosen. He reacts to things that are not there. The woman says. Finally. Empty corners, open spaces, sometimes nothing at all, and when he does, he becomes focused. She chooses that word carefully, as if it is safer than the others she could have used. Handlers could not redirect him, and in this work, we need reliability you can predict. And there it is again, that word, predictable, the quiet demand that everything worth trusting must first be understood. Daniel nods once, slowly, as if the explanation makes sense in a way that surprises even him. Because unpredictability to someone who cannot see is not chaos, it is simply another form of information waiting to be understood. Rex exhales softly, a low breath that brushes against Daniel's wrist, and for a second the dog's body tightens again, not toward the man, but towards something beyond him, something shifting just out of reach of human awareness, and Daniel feels it, not the thing itself, but the reaction to it. The subtle change in muscle, the almost silent adjustment in stance. He is not reacting to nothing. Daniel says, his voice calm, certain in a way that draws a few uneasy glances from across the room. He is reacting to something you cannot see. And the words settle heavier than the earlier warnings, because they carry a different kind of truth, one that does not rely on sight at all. A man near the back lets out a quiet breath, almost a scoff. With all due respect, sir, that is exactly the problem. But Daniel only turns his head slightly toward the sound, not offended, not defensive, just listening, always listening, the way he learned to after the war took the horizon from him and replaced it with echoes and instinct. No, he replies softly, his hands still resting on Rex, steady now, grounded. That is the reason. And in that moment, the line between handler and dog blurs into something else entirely, something quieter, something older than training manuals and behavior reports, a connection built not on control, but on trust, the kind that does not ask for proof before it decides to believe. Somewhere down the corridor, a door opens and closes again, a faint draft slipping through the building, carrying with it a sense so subtle no one else reacts, no one else notices, but Rex does, and this time the shift is immediate, his head lifting slightly, ears angling forward, a low sound beginning deep in his chest, not loud, not aggressive, but urgent in a way that does not belong to memory or habit, and Daniel feels it instantly, the change, the tension returning like a warning whispered through fur and bone, and without thinking, without seeing, he tightens his grip just enough to acknowledge it. Not to stop it, but to understand it, because whatever Rex is sensing now, it is closer than before, and this time, it is not going to be ignored. The change does not pass unnoticed this time, not by the dog, and not by the man who has learned to read the world through what cannot be seen, because Rex does not lunge or bark or break the fragile calm of the room, he simply shifts his weight forward with a precision that feels deliberate, controlled, as if every muscle in his body has aligned toward a single point just beyond the doorway. And Daniel feels it travel through his hand like a quiet signal, the tightening beneath the fur, the subtle rise of breath that no longer matches the rhythm from before. There it is again. Someone whispers. From behind, the unease growing louder now, harder to dismiss, because even those who trust their eyes more than anything else can sense when something does not belong. Daniel straightens slightly, his cane tapping once against the floor, not out of uncertainty, but to anchor himself in the space, mapping the room in sound, in distance, in the faint echo that returns to him a fraction of a second later, and in that echo something feels different. Not wrong, but altered, like a note slightly out of tune in a song no one else realizes is playing. What is behind that hallway? Daniel asks quietly, turning his head toward where Rex is facing, and the woman hesitates before answering. Storage rooms, maintenance access, nothing that should concern you. But the hesitation lingers longer than the words, and Daniel catches it, because hesitation has a sound of its own. Rex exhales again, sharper this time, his body lowering just a fraction, not aggressive, not defensive, but focused. Intensely so, and Daniel feels a strange calm settle over him, the kind that comes before a decision you do not fully understand but know you have to make. "Open it," Daniel says, not loud, not demanding, just certain, and a few heads turn immediately, disbelief flickering across faces that are used to following protocol, not instinct. "Sir, we cannot just," the man begins, but the sentence fades when Rex lets out a low, steady sound that cuts through the air like a warning meant not to frighten, but to insist. The silence that follows is heavier than before, pressing against the walls, against the people, against the quiet order of a place built on rules, and then, reluctantly, footsteps move, keys jingle softly, a lock turns with a dull metallic click, and the door at the end of the hallway creaks open just enough to let the air shift. It is subtle, so subtle that no one else reacts at first. But Daniel feels it immediately, the faint difference in temperature, the way the air moves differently against his skin, carrying with it a trace of something unfamiliar, something sharp and almost metallic, not strong enough to alarm, but present enough to notice if you are paying attention. Rex reacts before anyone can speak, his head lifting, ears forward, the tension no longer contained but not yet released, and he steps forward once, then stops, waiting, not for permission, but for Daniel. The room seems to hold its breath again, every eye now on the pair who stand at the edge of something no one has named yet, and Daniel nods slightly, more to himself than anyone else. His hand leaving Rex's neck only to rest briefly against the dog's shoulder, grounding, steadying, acknowledging the silent message that has been building since the moment they met. "Stay with me," Daniel murmurs, not as a command, but as a promise, and Rex moves in perfect alignment beside him, not pulling, not resisting, just guiding, step by careful step toward a doorway no one else would have thought to question, toward something that has been there all along, unnoticed, unheard, unseen, waiting for the one being in the room who never relied on sight to recognize the truth. The hallway does not welcome them, it simply exists, narrow and quiet, stretching out with a kind of stillness that feels heavier the farther they move into it, and each step Daniel takes is measured not by sight but by sound, by the soft echo of his boots against concrete, by the faint hum of something electrical hidden behind the walls, by the way Rex's breathing shifts just slightly ahead of him, guiding without pulling, leading without force. The air grows cooler by a few degrees, subtle enough that no one else comments, but Daniel feels it against his face, that quiet drop in temperature that carries with it a trace of something metallic, something sterile, something that does not belong in a simple storage corridor, and Rex slows, not stopping, but adjusting, his body angled just enough to keep himself between Daniel and whatever lies ahead, as if instinct alone has decided the position he needs to hold. Behind them, footsteps follow at a distance, hesitant, unsure, the staff, unwilling to fully commit yet unable to turn away now that the moment has begun to unfold, and one voice breaks the silence in a low whisper. "We should not be doing this." But no one steps forward to stop it. Daniel tilts his head slightly, listening again, and this time there is something else, something faint but present, a soft irregular sound beneath the steady hum, like a vent struggling to push air through a space it was never meant to reach, and it comes and goes in uneven intervals, barely there, but enough. "Do you hear that?" Daniel asks quietly, and there is a pause before someone answers. "Hear what?" Because to them the hallway is empty, normal, harmless, but to Daniel the absence of sound where there should be more is just as loud as anything else. Rex stops abruptly, not with panic, not with fear, but with certainty, his posture locking into place, ears forward, gaze fixed on a door halfway down the corridor, one that looks no different from the others, plain, closed, unmarked except for a small metal handle that catches the overhead light. Daniel feels the stop immediately. The tension traveling up through the leash he now loosely holds, and he does not question it, not anymore, because whatever doubt might have existed has already been replaced by something steadier, something rooted in the quiet understanding that this dog is not guessing. "This one," Daniel says softly, turning his face toward the door, and a man steps forward reluctantly, keys in hand again, the faint jingle sounding louder now in the tight space. "It is just maintenance storage," he insists, more to reassure himself than anyone else, but his voice carries a thin edge that was not there before. The key slides into the lock, hesitates, then turns, and the door opens with a slow creak that lets out a faint rush of air, cooler, sharper, carrying that metallic trace stronger now, enough that even those behind them shift slightly, exchanging glances they do not voice. Rex reacts instantly, not lunging, not barking, but stepping forward with purpose, his body tense but controlled, his nose lifting slightly as he draws in the air. Processing, confirming, and Daniel follows without hesitation. One careful step across the threshold, his cane tapping lightly once before lifting again, because he no longer needs it in the same way. Not here, not now. The room beyond is dimmer, the light weaker, filled with shelves and equipment that sit undisturbed, but there is something off, something subtle in the stillness, the way the air feels heavier in one corner, the way the faint sound Daniel noticed before seems stronger here, uneven, almost mechanical but not quite steady. There is something wrong, Daniel says, his voice calm but firm, and this time no one argues, because even those who rely on sight can feel it now, that quiet imbalance in the space, that sense that something has shifted out of place. Rex moves a few feet ahead, then stops again, turning his head slightly back toward Daniel, waiting, always waiting, and Daniel steps forward until his hand finds the dog's shoulder once more, grounding himself in that steady presence. "Show me," he murmurs, and Rex responds immediately, guiding him a few steps to the right, toward a section of wall where the air feels cooler still, where the faint sound pulses just beneath the surface, and Daniel reaches out slowly, his fingers brushing against metal, smooth but cold, a panel set into the wall that no one else had thought to check. Behind them, someone inhales sharply, the realization beginning to form, not fully understood yet, but undeniable, and in that quiet, suspended moment, the truth begins to surface, not through sight, not through assumption, but through instinct, through trust. Through the one creature in the room who never stopped paying attention to what others could not perceive, and Daniel, standing there with his hand against the hidden panel and Rex steady at his side, knows without needing to see that whatever this is, it was never nothing, it was always something waiting to be noticed. Daniel does not pull his hand away from the cold metal panel, not immediately, because the sensation lingers there longer than it should, the chill seeping into his fingertips in a way that feels unnatural for a simple storage wall, and beneath that cold there is something else, a faint vibration, subtle but steady, like a quiet pulse hidden behind layers meant to conceal it. Rex stands close, his body angled slightly forward, his breathing controlled but alert, every muscle tuned to the same invisible signal, and for the first time since they entered the hallway, the dog lets out a soft, restrained whine, not of fear, not of distress, but of urgency, the kind that asks to be understood rather than ignored. "There is something behind this," Daniel says, his voice low but unwavering, and this time no one interrupts him, because the certainty in his tone has replaced the doubt that once filled the room. One of the staff members steps closer, hesitant but drawn in, his hand reaching out to the panel Daniel has already found, fingers brushing along the edges until he locates the seam that should not be there, hidden just well enough to go unnoticed unless someone is searching for it. "This is not on the standard layout," the man mutters, more to himself than anyone else, and the unease in his voice spreads quietly through the others gathered at the doorway. Rex shifts again, his nose lifting slightly as he inhales, confirming what he already knows, and Daniel feels the movement, the tension, the silent insistence that whatever lies beyond that panel is not meant to be ignored any longer. "Open it," Daniel says, not louder than before, but with a weight that settles into the room like a decision already made. There is a brief hesitation, the kind that comes from standing at the edge of something unknown, and then the man nods to another staff member who moves quickly, retrieving a small tool from a nearby shelf, the metal clicking softly as it is placed against the edge of the panel. The sound of it being pried loose is slow, careful, each inch revealing more of the hidden space behind it, and with every second the air changes, the metallic scent growing stronger, sharper now, enough that even those who had dismissed it before take a step back without realizing why. Daniel remains still, his hand resting lightly against Rex's shoulder, grounding himself in the only certainty he has in that moment. And Rex does not move away, does not break his focus, his body aligned with the opening as if he has been waiting for this exact moment since the first time he sensed it. The panel finally gives way with a soft metallic shift, revealing a narrow compartment behind the wall. Not large, not obvious, but clearly not part of the original design, and from within it the faint sound Daniel heard before becomes clearer, a soft irregular hiss, uneven, inconsistent, like something trying to escape in small, controlled bursts. Step back, someone says quickly, the urgency now unmistakable, and a few people move instinctively, their confidence replaced by caution, but Daniel does not step back, not yet, because he is listening, focusing on that sound, on the rhythm of it, on the way it rises and falls in a pattern that feels wrong. Rex takes one small step forward, just enough to position himself between Daniel and the opening, his posture protective but calm, and Daniel understands without needing to be told, his hand tightening slightly on the dog's shoulder in acknowledgement. "You knew," Daniel whispers, not as a question, but as a realization, and Rex exhales softly, the tension in his body easing just a fraction now that the hidden truth is no longer concealed. Behind them, voices begin to rise, instructions being given, steps being taken to address what has been uncovered, but Daniel hears none of it clearly, because in that moment everything narrows down to the quiet presence beside him, the steady breath, the unwavering instinct that led them here. "He is not unpredictable," Daniel says quietly, more to the room than to anyone in particular, his voice steady, grounded in something deeper than explanation. "He just refuses to ignore what the rest of us cannot see." And no one argues this time, because the evidence is no longer a matter of belief, it is there, hidden in the wall that should have been empty, revealed not by sight, not by routine, but by the silent insistence of a dog who never stopped paying attention, and a man who chose to trust him. The room does not erupt into chaos, not yet, but the shift is undeniable, the quiet tension breaking into controlled urgency as voices sharpen and footsteps quicken with purpose, and still Daniel remains where he is, grounded by the steady presence at his side, because in the middle of movement and reaction, he has already reached the part that matters most, the understanding that what was dismissed as unpredictable was never random at all. Rex eases his stance just slightly, not relaxing completely, but releasing the tight edge of alertness now that the source has been uncovered, his breathing returning to a slower rhythm, though his ears remain forward, always listening, always aware, and Daniel mirrors that calm in his own way, his shoulders lowering just enough to show the tension has passed but not the attention. Behind them, someone speaks into a radio, voice controlled but urgent, describing what has been found, requesting assistance, using terms that belong to protocols and procedures. But Daniel does not follow the words, he follows the tone, the shift from doubt to certainty that echoes in every syllable. "Sir?" The woman from earlier steps closer now, her voice different, no longer cautious in the same way. "We need to move you out of this area for safety." And there is no resistance in her tone, only respect, as if something about this moment has quietly rewritten her understanding of both the man and the dog. Daniel nods once, slowly, and for the first time he takes a small step back, not out of fear, but because the purpose has been fulfilled, the unseen has been made visible to those who depend on sight, and that is enough. Rex turns with him immediately, no hesitation, no confusion, aligning himself perfectly at Daniel's side, his body brushing lightly against Daniel's leg as if to confirm that the connection between them has not changed, only deepened. They move together out of the room, past the doorway, back into a hallway where the air feels different now, not because it has changed, but because the awareness of it has, and the sounds that once felt uncertain now settle into a clearer pattern, footsteps, voices, the faint hum of the building returning to something almost familiar. Daniel pauses just beyond the threshold, his hand resting once more on Rex's neck, fingers pressing gently into the fur, not as a command, not as control, but as gratitude, silent and steady. "You did not guess," Daniel says under his breath, the words meant for the dog alone, and Rex exhales softly, leaning into the touch for a brief second before straightening again, his posture composed, disciplined, as if the work is simply part of who he is and not something that needs recognition. Further down the hall, more personnel arrive, their steps brisk, their voices layered with authority and focus, and yet when they pass by Daniel and Rex, there's a subtle pause, a glance that lingers just a fraction longer than necessary. Because the story has already begun to spread in quiet fragments: the dangerous dog, the blind veteran, the hidden compartment that no one else found. "Is that him?" One voice murmurs, not unkind, just curious, and another answers in a lower tone. "That is the dog." As if that alone explains everything now. Daniel does not react to the attention, does not turn toward it, because his understanding does not need confirmation from others. It is already complete, built from the moment he first heard the low growl that did not belong to fear, from the first touch that carried more truth than any report ever could. Rex remained still beside him, not seeking approval, not responding to the shifting perception around him, his focus already resetting, scanning, listening, because instinct does not end when the moment does, it simply waits for the next signal. "They said you were the problem," Daniel murmurs quietly, his hands still resting against the dog. "But you were the warning." And in that simple truth, something shifts once more, not in the room, not in the building, but in the way the story will be told from this point forward, because what people call dangerous is often just something they have not learned how to understand, and sometimes it takes losing one sense entirely to finally trust another. Rex gives a small, almost imperceptible movement of his head, not quite a nod, not quite anything that could be named, but enough that Daniel feels it, and for a brief second, in the middle of a hallway filled with voices and motion, everything becomes quiet again, the kind of quiet that does not come from absence, but from certainty, the kind that does not need to be explained, only trusted. They do not send him home that day, not right away, because something has changed in the way the room sees him, and more importantly, in the way they see the dog at his side, the label that once followed Rex like a shadow now hanging uncertain in the air, no longer fitting as neatly as it once did. Daniel stands near the far end of the facility, where the hallway opens into a wider training area, the sounds here softer, more open, footsteps spreading out instead of echoing back, voices carrying differently. And through it all Rex remains close, not tense anymore, but not careless either, his awareness still active, still listening to the parts of the world that others do not notice. "Mr. Hayes?" The woman approaches again, slower this time, her tone measured but no longer guarded. "We need to reassess some things." And there is something almost like humility in her voice now, the kind that comes when certainty has been quietly undone. Daniel nods, his hand resting lightly along Rex's back, fingers tracing the line of muscle that shifts with each breath, grounding himself in that familiar rhythm. "You already did," he replies simply, and she pauses, not because she disagrees, but because she understands exactly what he means. Across the room, a handler watches them, arms crossed at first, then slowly lowering, his posture changing as he studies Rex not as a problem, but as a possibility, and that shift, subtle as it is, carries more weight than any formal decision ever could. "We thought he was reacting without cause," the man admits quietly, stepping closer, his voice no longer defensive. "But he was detecting something we missed." And Daniel tilts his head slightly, listening not just to the words, but to the truth finally settling into them. "He does not need to be predictable," Daniel says, his tone calm, steady. "He needs to be trusted." And Rex shifts beside him at the sound of his voice, not reacting to the words themselves, but to the certainty behind them. A pause follows, longer than before, not filled with doubt this time, but with reconsideration. The kind that opens doors slowly, carefully, because it means admitting something was wrong. "Would you consider training with him?" the woman asks after a moment, her voice quieter now, more deliberate. "Not as a standard placement, but something different." And the word hangs there, uncertain but hopeful, because what stands before them does not fit the usual structure anymore. Daniel does not answer immediately, not because he is unsure, but because he is listening again, to Rex, to the space, to the quiet absence of that earlier tension that once pressed against the air, and finding nothing alarming, nothing hidden, only stillness, he lets out a slow breath. "He already chose," Daniel says, his hand pressing gently against Rex's shoulder. "I am just catching up." And for a moment, no one speaks, because there is nothing left to argue, nothing left to explain. Somewhere behind them, a door closes softly, the building settling back into its normal rhythm. But the quiet shift that has taken place does not fade with it, it stays woven into the way people now look at the dog, at the man, at the space between them. Rex lowers his head slightly, not in submission, not in fatigue, but in calm, his posture steady, grounded, no longer bracing for something unseen because what needed to be revealed has already been brought into the light, and Daniel feels it, that absence of urgency, that quiet signal that for now, there is nothing more to warn about. "You are not dangerous," Daniel murmurs under his breath, his fingers brushing once more through the fur at the dog's neck. "You just refuse to stay silent." And Rex exhales slowly, the sound soft, almost content, as if the weight of being misunderstood has finally lifted, not because the world has changed, but because one person chose to listen, and sometimes, that is enough to change everything. The days that follow do not feel dramatic, there are no loud celebrations, no sudden declarations that everything has changed, but something quieter settles into place, something deeper, and it begins in the small details that most people would overlook. The way Rex now walks beside Daniel through the training grounds with a calm confidence that does not need to prove itself. The way the handlers who once kept their distance now pause just a second longer when they pass, watching not with suspicion but with a kind of respect that has not yet found its voice. Daniel learns the rhythm of the facility not through sight, but through repetition, through the cadence of footsteps on different surfaces, the faint echo of doors opening at certain hours, the low hum of equipment cycling on and off in predictable patterns, and through it all Rex becomes more than a guide, he becomes a translator. Interpreting a world Daniel cannot see into signals he can trust, a subtle shift in direction, a pause before a step, the gentle pressure of a shoulder guiding him away from something that does not feel right. They train together, but it does not look like training in the traditional sense. There are no sharp commands, no rigid drills, only a quiet exchange of awareness, Daniel learning to recognize the smallest changes in Rex's posture, Rex learning the nuances of Daniel's movement, his pace, his balance. The way he tilts his head when he is listening for something beyond the obvious. One afternoon, as the sun settles somewhere beyond the walls Daniel cannot see, the facility grows quieter, the usual noise fading into a softer background hum, and they walk through a different corridor, one used less often, where the air carries a faint scent of cleaning solution and old metal, and Rex slows, not abruptly, not alarmed, but deliberate, his head lifting slightly as he processes something in the air. Daniel feels it immediately. The subtle change in pace, the shift in weight, and he stops without needing to be told, his hand resting lightly on Rex's back. "What is it?" he murmurs, not expecting words, only the answer that comes through movement. Rex does not pull away, does not grow tense like before, instead he stands still, listening, confirming, and then after a moment, he relaxes, the signal passing, whatever it was deemed not a threat, and Daniel exhales softly, trusting that decision without question, because trust has become their language now, more reliable than anything written in a file. Across the facility, the staff has begun to adjust their own understanding, quietly at first, reviewing reports, retracing the moments where Rex reacted and no one else did, finding patterns where there once seemed to be none, and with each discovery the narrative shifts further, not toward redemption in a loud, dramatic sense, but toward clarity, toward truth. "He was never wrong," one handler says one evening, his voice low, almost to himself, as he reviews a timeline of past incidents. "We just did not know what he was detecting." And the words carry a weight that settles into the room, reshaping everything that came before. Daniel does not need to hear those conversations to understand what is happening. He feels it in the way people speak to him now, in the absence of caution when they approach Rex, in the subtle respect that has replaced doubt, and yet none of it matters as much as the quiet moments between him and the dog, the shared stillness when there is nothing to detect, nothing to warn about, only the steady presence of one life trusting another. One evening, as they sit just outside the main building, the air cooler now, carrying the faint scent of grass and distant pavement, Daniel rests his hand on Rex's neck, fingers pressing gently into the familiar warmth, and for a long moment neither of them moves, the world around them fading into a soft background of distant sound. "You see everything I cannot," Daniel says quietly, not with sadness, but with a kind of acceptance that feels complete, and Rex shifts slightly, leaning into the touch, not as a response that can be defined, but as something understood all the same. The silence that follows is not empty, it is full, filled with the quiet certainty that they have already crossed the line that once separated doubt from belief, and somewhere in that stillness, the truth settles fully into place, not spoken, not announced, but known, that what was once feared has become trusted, and what was once unseen has finally been understood, not by sight, but by something far more reliable, something that does not fail when the lights go out. Something that listens, that waits, that never ignores the quiet signals the world tries to hide. It does not end with applause, not with recognition written in bold letters or a ceremony that tries to explain what happened in a language too small to hold it. It ends the way most truths do, quietly, in a moment that almost passes unnoticed unless you are paying attention, and Daniel has learned how to pay attention in ways that do not rely on sight. The facility moves on, schedules resume, routines return, but something fundamental has shifted beneath it all, not in the structure of the building, not in the policies written in binders, but in the way people pause now. The way they listen just a little longer before dismissing what they do not understand. And at the center of that quiet shift walks a man and a dog who were both once misread by the world in different ways. Daniel no longer counts his steps the same way he did before, because he does not need to measure distance as carefully when Rex is beside him, the cane still in his hand but no longer his only connection to the ground ahead. Now it is just one part of a larger awareness. One that includes the steady presence of four paws moving in perfect rhythm with his own. Rex does not carry the weight of expectation anymore, not the kind that tries to force him into something predictable, something limited. Instead, he moves with the same quiet purpose he always had, only now it is understood, not questioned. His pause is no longer seen as hesitation, but as information, his stillness no longer mistaken for confusion, but recognized as focus. One morning, before the building fully wakes, before the hum of activity fills the halls, Daniel steps outside into the cool air, the kind that carries the faint scent of early grass and distant asphalt warming under the first light he cannot see, and Rex is already alert beside him, not tense, not searching, just present, taking in the world in a way that has nothing to do with fear and everything to do with awareness. They stand there for a moment, side by side, and Daniel lifts his face slightly, feeling the air move across his skin. Listening to the subtle shifts in the environment, the distant sound of a car passing on a road beyond the property, the soft rustle of leaves somewhere nearby, and beneath it all, the steady, quiet breath of the dog beside him. "I used to think losing my sight took everything from me," Daniel says. Softly, his voice carrying into the still morning, not directed at anyone, not even fully at Rex, but spoken anyway because some truths need to exist outside of silence. "But it only took what I did not need." And Rex shifts slightly at his side, leaning just enough that Daniel feels it, a grounding presence that does not interrupt, does not respond in words, but answers all the same. The past does not disappear, the reports, the labels, the moments where Rex was misunderstood, they still exist. Somewhere in files and memories, but they no longer define him. Just as Daniel is no longer defined by what he cannot see, because what remains is something stronger, something quieter, something that does not need validation to be real. A door opens behind them, footsteps approach, someone calls out a greeting, and the day begins again, ordinary in every visible way, but different where it matters. Because now there is a story that lives in the spaces people cannot see, a story about a warning that was never heard until someone chose to listen, about a dog that was never dangerous, only honest, and about a man who found a new way to see the world not through his eyes, but through trust. Daniel lowers his hand to rest against Rex's neck once more, fingers pressing gently into the familiar warmth, and for a brief second everything becomes still again, not because the world has stopped, but because they have found their place within it. Aligned in a way that does not need explanation. Only presence. "We are good," Daniel murmurs, and Rex exhales softly, the sound quiet, steady, certain, and in that simple exchange, without witness, without ceremony, the story closes the way it was always meant to, not with noise, not with proof, but with something far more enduring, a quiet understanding that sometimes the things we fear are not dangerous at all, they are just telling the truth in a language we have not learned how to hear yet.